And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Strategy Show, Wednesday, September 24th. I am Josh Engelman here to break down this 11-game slate for today, looking kind of similar to what we had yesterday, arguably more extreme, and we'll dig into that in a bit. But first, it would be incredibly helpful for those of you that are here or those of you watching this later today. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. That will help me out tremendously. How'd it go for you guys last night? Mine was decent. Save for the fact that my second best lineup had a guy that didn't start in it. I must have missed the St. Louis lineup coming out. It wouldn't have made much of a difference. Ultimately I was up yesterday, like 20%. Got a cough. I was happy with that. And now we're here. We're back to try to break it down today. Stephen Leibowitz, good morning. I know Laffy and Greg are still finishing up the NFL strategy show. If they haven't finished that up just yet, make sure you guys are checking that out. They've been live for the past hour. And then we're going to get into this baseball slate for today. You'll also get myself and Eric later tonight for MLB Live Before Locks, so you definitely don't want to miss that one. We'll be live for this one, breaking it down again. But today we're going to spend some time looking through the pitchers, looking through the hitters, finding our stacks. We've got a very different pitching slate today compared to what we have yesterday, save for a chalky Seattle 7K pitcher going up against Colorado in Seattle. We're doing the same vibe today that we did yesterday, but we also have $9,700 Max Fried, 9K DeGrom, 10-2 Snell, 10-7 Crochet, Sonny Gray, Hunter Brown, Matt Boyd at 8,300. Robbie Ray is the third highest top 2 percentage odds at 8K. We got a bundle of dudes at the top that we need to sift through for today, which is not fun, if I'm being honest with you guys. Let's start with Castillo. I don't think there's much to say here. Obviously, Bryce Miller did not work out totally the way that you would want. I think that was pretty helpful for the path that we took yesterday for Cole Reagans. Who's the Minnesota jerk off that pitched yesterday? Can't remember, but he was good. Oh my God, who was it? Yeah, well, one of you guys in chat are about to tell me. But we found those pay downs. Kevin Gausman was not a guy I liked for yesterday. Reagans was a guy I liked a little bit more. That worked out pretty well for me. Luis Heel wasn't amazing. It was Zebby. Yes, thank you. Zebby Matthews. Yeah, he ended up fantastic yesterday as well. But we're doing the same thing with Castillo today that we did with Bryce Miller. Castillo's at 7,700. We've established what this Rockies matchup is, what this Seattle Park is. 3-run implied total for Luis Castillo today, or I guess technically for the Colorado Rockies. 0.2 of a run better than Fried. It's by far the best implied total for today's slate. He's sitting at the highest top 2 pitcher odds of anybody on the slate. We could have a conversation about that in a bit. Feels a tad high to me. The reason that Luis Castillo is 47% owned in our first run is because he's also 25% to be a top 2 value. That is the highest mark of anybody on the slate. When you have the highest top 2 pitcher odds and the highest top 2 value odds, you are going to be heavily owned. And that is what we're getting out of Luis Castillo today. I'll pull him up ever so briefly to look at the matchup, but my takeaway today is the same. Just take everything I said about Bryce Miller yesterday and apply it to this matchup. 18% K rate for Castillo against lefties. Not nearly the same guy that he used to be. Still a 25% K rate to righties. gives up a little bit of power, nothing crazy. Now, righties don't really hit him at all. He's at 300, 346 to lefties. Everything is in his favor for today. So I want to pull up the betting odds and just take a look at his props for right now. But then we're going to just ignore him for the rest of this show because it's pretty cut and dry. So, Luis Castillo. $6.5 Ks is the strikeout prop. And that is without any juice. We have the true odds at 104. That's as close to a coin flip on 6.5 as you can get to. That's higher than Bryce Miller from yesterday. Hard to have a problem with a 6.5 strikeout prop on a $7,700 pitcher. We're talking about an outs prop for Castillo. It is over 17.5 with heavy juice. This is a guy you're expecting to throw 6 innings today. That is awesome to see. I'm guessing his earned run prop is 1.5 with some juice to the... It's probably pretty neutral, actually. Maybe a little bit of juice to the over. It's 1.5 neutral. But, run total's 3, so that makes some sense. It's just Luis Castillo day. I have nothing to add to this. It's the same thing we saw yesterday, and it all holds up again for today. The clear top option. I have Sims run from earlier today. This will be of no surprise to anyone, but Luis Castillo ended up in 93% of my top 150 lineups, 2x the field. We'll see what we want to do with that. I like Castillo more today than I liked Bryce Miller yesterday. I think there's a higher strikeout ceiling here for sure. But at the same time, we need to figure out if we have any alternatives to him. And that's what throws us into figuring out what the hell we do with the rest of these guys. We've got Max Fried, Robbie Ray, and DeGrom all in and around 20% owned. DeGrom a little bit higher. Ray just coming in underneath it. Ray is more like a Castillo option. Slightly lower top 2, slightly lower top value, significantly lower ownership. I mean, think about this. There's a 6 percentage point gap in Robbie Ray and Castillo in top 2 pitcher. But there's a 30 percentage point gap in ownership. So let's think about Robbie Ray here against St. Louis. Obviously not the same caliber pitcher as Logan Webb, who was pedestrian yesterday. By the way, I put out top pitchers and top stacks on Tails. If you want to head to oddshopper.com, check the Tails expert picks section. Totally free. You just browse the picks feed. You'll get free plays as well if you're looking to get some bets down. Mitch has got his post out for Thursday Night Football, but I dropped top stacks and top pitchers if you guys want to go check that out. But we need to look at Robbie Ray here. So obviously great park. San Francisco nerfs power. That is helpful. Is Robbie Ray not the starter, or is add more funds just wrong? Is Brubaker opening? Yeah, Reg Kelly, I'm getting to that too. What happened to Ray for today? Yeah, that's Brubaker again on Fangraphs. Brubaker will start Wednesday. That came out today. So this came out last night. Brubaker will start. Robbie Ray done for the year. Let me send a message to the data team right now so I can get that updated. Give me 1 second. All right, we got that updated. So let's sunset any sort of analysis for JT Brubaker, who would appear to 7K and honestly might look interesting. But it looks like they're locking down Robbie Ray for the rest of the regular season. It was supposed to be Ray. That came out in the middle of the night. I don't think all the data sources got updated for that one. Well, we can skip Robbie Ray then, and we can start figuring out what we want to do with the rest of these guys. $9,700 Fried at home against the White Sox. $9K DeGrom at home against the Twins. Blake Snell on the road against Arizona. Garrett Crochet on the road against Toronto. I want to start with Snell. Just on the surface, 7% owned, 15% top 2 odds, likely to go up once we pull Robbie Ray. I need to look into Blake Snell here. Now, the first thing that we look at for Snell is not going to be anything other than just, well, this dude's great. Lefties do not hit him. 34% K rate, 0.085x ISO allowed, and a 250x WOBA. Just dominant. Doesn't get much better on the right side for when these guys get to the dish. 28% K rate, 102x ISO, 300x WOBA, north of a 17% swinging strike rate. So clearly, we like Blake Snell as a starting pitcher. So let's take a look at the active roster, the Arizona Diamondbacks against lefties this season. That's team. That's not team. 7th highest WRC plus at 111. 164 ISO is 9th. But this is the one that matters. The second lowest strikeout rate in baseball at 17.9%, just 0.2% from tying San Diego. So this is on paper a terrible strikeout matchup for Snell. Now, I care a lot less about strikeout matchups when the starter is I strike everybody out type guy. When you run these like really difficult strikeout matchups against guys that aren't strikeout guys, that's where it tends to scare me way more. So I want to look at that strikeout prop for Snell, because when I just look at it, he stands out the most to me. Just like using my brain type stuff. Not necessarily because I dug into it in any way. So let's take a look at these strikeout props. Snell. Now this is an interesting one to think about. Because of this being such a bad strikeout matchup, Blake Snell's strikeout prop is 6.5. It's actually worse than Luis Castillo's. Not only that, he's expected to give up more runs. Castillo was at 1.5, no juice. Blake Snell's at 2.5, obviously heavy juice, but the strikeout prop looks fine. Is it a great matchup? No. This much we know. Arizona does profile well against lefties. And if we go to Chase Field, 106 park factor for runs, but a 90 park factor for homers. The question becomes, can he generate enough strikeouts? It's not a great strikeout park. At the very least, I want to get to a 10-2 Blake Snell very specifically because of his ownership. To me, this is an outstanding pay up to be contrarian option. 15% top 2, 7% owned, the highest leverage score in the top 2 pitchers tool. I'm willing to take some shots on Blake Snell because of that ownership. If Max Fried's going to be 20, if Jake DeGrom's going to be 24, I think there's a path to Snell. But we also need to look at Garrett Crochet. Now, we know that this is going to look very similar to what we just talked about for Snell. Crochet, 31% K rate to lefties, 0.071 ISO. No one touches him. Now, he does give it up a little bit more to righties, but he does strike them out too. 32% K rate, 166x ISO, still very manageable. Sub 300x WOBA, obviously very manageable. I mean, this dude's given up a 207x WOBA to lefties. That's insane. 15% swinging strike rate. As we look at the strikeout props, because we need a comparison point here. Garrett Crochet, 6.5, little bit of juice to the under. Looking basically like some of the other guys that we've talked about. We might have to have a real conversation about the Jake DeGrom strikeout prop as well. Now, if we go back to that leaderboard, we already have this sorted out for active roster lefties. So we need to take a look at Toronto and see where they land. Toronto, much like Arizona, been very good against lefties. Arizona was 7th, Toronto 9th in WRC+. Again, this is a team that's 3rd in strikeout rate, just behind Arizona. But the big difference here, we talked about Arizona still having some pop. Toronto against lefties this season, 9th in ISO at 137. Now, if we think about this from a park perspective, we got to go to Toronto. That's going to be a different venue than we have for the Diamondbacks. So let's go to Toronto. Park factor for homers, much higher. Not much of a strikeout park. Does play up runs. So the park situation is very similar. The strikeout matchup is very similar. And when I say very similar, I mean to Snell. But the lack of power for Toronto also stands out to me. I will have no problem getting some Snell or Crochet. Let me see if we got an update there. Let me go ahead and refresh this because good news, everybody. Welcome to JT Brubaker. We got Robbie Ray out. That has moved some stuff around here. Castillo looking stronger. Still positive leverage on Snell. Garrett Crochet actually jumped Snell. Picked up a little bit more ownership, though. But Snell still sitting at 9%. So let's hit on the guy that's actually second today. Max Fried, 9,700 at home against the White Sox. Second in top 2. Second in ownership. By the way, Jay Nevy, he said, I'm late, but I'm always here. So please don't cancel this show, Josh. When you dig in, it really helps me with my process. This show's not going anywhere. The season is. So you'll have me tomorrow. You'll have me on Friday. And then I believe the MLB schedule will be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week. I don't think there are games on Monday or Friday. I'm just going based on what I vaguely remember. So in that case, you'll get me for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week as well, because I believe they're all pretty sizable slates, 3 or 4 games. After that, it's probably over for strategy shows because we're just never going to have enough games. My expectation is that there's 5 more. And then live before locks will be a different conversation. So Fried against the White Sox. Stop me if you've heard this before, but we've got a lefty on the hill that strikes people out against a not good baseball team. I feel like we just talked about this a couple times. So Fried, 31% K rate to lefties, 156x ISO, 270x WOBA. You're not worried about a single lefty that steps to the plate for Chicago, other than the fact that they do have some young power talent. Now, the strikeouts aren't nearly as plentiful against righties, just a 21% K rate to righties, but they also don't touch him. 124x ISO, 308x WOBA. Swinging strike rate is a lot lower than some of the guys that we've just talked about. But let's talk through Max Fried's strikeout prop. Over 5.5, heavy juice to the over. So he's sitting in that exact same 6 range as everybody else that we've mentioned. And then if we want to talk about it from an outs perspective, does Max Fried not have an outs prop? Well, apparently not at any major sports books. Surely he has an earned run prop that is at 1.5 with some relatively minimal juice. Yeah, 1.5, slightly juiced to the under. Red Skittles, man. Those were some interesting takes during the NFL show. Old Cam Scatabo, proven commodity in comparison to other rookies. Something like that. Well, luckily for us, we still have FanGraphs pulled up and we have the lefty active roster filter still set. We can take a look and see the White Sox are 17th in WRC plus at 96. This is a much better strikeout matchup compared to the teams we talked about. It's 22%. That's 17th. This is not a team that walks terribly often. Tied for essentially third lowest walk rate. And then from a K perspective, middle of the pack, 22%. So not a team that you even acknowledge against lefties. Just completely uninteresting. And I think that's the reason that we're seeing Fried be this much ahead of Crochet and Snell. Now, from a power perspective for Fried, that's not ideal, but at the Yankee Stadium, that is. But I think if you look at that section, Fried has to be ahead of Crochet and Snell. The question you start looking at is, what are the ownership trade-offs for when I try to use these guys? And then we still have to take a look at the third most owned guy today, 9K Jake DeGrom. Now, we're finally going to move to a right-handed pitcher, so that should be helpful. But 9K at home, taking on Minnesota. That is not news. As we look at Minnesota here and DeGrom, 30% K rate to lefties, 185x ISO, but just a 300x WOBA. Basically, the ball's either going to leave the yard or you're going to be out. Against righties, the strikeout rate dropped quite a bit. A lot more like Max Fried, 24%. They don't hit him either, though. 145x ISO, 285x WOBA. All of that is incredibly positive. Let's flip these FanGraph stats over to versus righties. Take a look at Minnesota. They have the 20th best WRC plus against righties, 100 on the dot. Strikeouts, middle of the pack. 173 ISO is essentially tied for 8th with Boston and Detroit and the Angels and honestly Royals and Rays. Everybody's just kind of jumbled in this spot. So a little bit of pop. Nothing crazy from a strikeout perspective. It's all pretty tame. And then if we look at the Texas ballpark as our final little item, 80 home run park factor in Texas this season. Just straight up nerfing everything. 83 park factor for runs. If we want to take a look at this in terms of the entire MLB season, the Rangers have the second lowest park factor, well, tied for the lowest with Seattle. The 80 home run factor is the third lowest mark. This is an aggressive pitcher's park. Not to mention, it does ever so slightly play up strikeouts by like 2%. So then if we look at the strikeout props here, this is where I think it makes DeGrom look really interesting. 6.5, pretty heavy juice to the under, but not all that different from Garrett Crochet. Better technically than Max Fried. Better than Blake Snell. All of that is on our side. The difference being will likely be right here. No outs prop on DeGrom either right now. Okay, that's fine. Maybe we see that pop up a little bit later. Earned run prop for DeGrom. 1.5 flat. So I can completely understand where the ownership to DeGrom is coming from. I do think that Fried and DeGrom are better than Crochet and better than Snell, but those ownership conversations start to become more apparent. And then we get to this mess of like Sonny Gray, Hunter Brown, Matt Boyd, Max Scherzer, who I think we should probably talk about right now. Scherzer, no Ks to lefties. They hit him very much. Lots of Ks to righties. They still hit him as well, at least for power. But what I thought was really interesting about the strikeout props earlier, I don't know if you guys saw Scherzer, 5.5 with a little bit of juice to the under. That's enough for me at his price tag. 15.5 outs is more of a limiting factor. I'll give you that. Boston against righties, 18th in WRC plus, 22.5% K rate. It's right there in that same conversation we just had. The 174 ISO is not ideal. That's 8th. But, you know, like 7,500 for Max Scherzer, 9% owned. Is he that much worse than Luis Castillo? Yeah, probably. But I do think he slots in pretty nicely as a second value option. Jake just mentioned David Fry took a Scooble heater to the face yesterday. Yeah, that was tough to watch. Even just like Scooble's reaction within a second told you everything you needed to know. Like he was, and you have like a balk after that. Like I can't imagine it's easy to continue to pitch knowing you just put 90 miles an hour plus in someone's jaw. Scary. Very scary. Who do you guys want me to touch on yet? I could probably look at one more guy before we flip this over to stacks, depending on who it is, maybe two. What do you guys have your eye on? You got Sonny Gray getting the throw in San Francisco. Hunter Brown is really good, but he's got a terrible park. You know, Yusei Kikuchi is sitting out there at 6,500. If that were in KC, you might feel a little bit better about it. Do you guys like anybody else? While I wait for that, checking me notes. All right. Devin says Brown. Reg Kelly says Kolek. Stephen Leibowitz says no. Let me look at Kolek just because he's 7K. Like, obviously, Hunter Brown's going to look generally okay. All right, Derek Wilson in for Kolek as well. Let's do it. Let's take a look at him quickly. Matchup against the Angels. Kolek at 7K. 19.5% K rate to lefties. X-ISO and X-WOBA, not ideal. Swinging strike rate, very not ideal. No strikeouts whatsoever against righties, but they legit don't hit him. Sub 100 X-ISO, sub 300 X-WOBA. This is not a strikeouts journey. This is an efficiency journey that we'd be on with Kolek. I'm going to assume his strikeout prop is like 3.5. Four and a half juice to the over. I got to be honest, I kind of like betting that under. That's incredibly surprising to me. 17.5 outs prop with a little bit of juice to the under. So you're expecting to go a bit deeper into this game. The strikeouts are better than I expected in my brain, which is, it's hard when my brain is messed up. Kolek 2.5 is the earned run prop. That's where it starts to get a little scarier. If we take a look at the Angels against righties, this is going to be why it's 4.5 and why I should have thought about it a little bit faster. Angels with the 26% K rate is good enough to basically bump him up a full K. Had I thought about that for a brief second, I probably would have tacked that on and said like, oh, it's 3.5 heavy juice to the over or something like that. But Anthony, that is if I had to guess, you not having it set to 1080p. 95 WRC plus for the Angels is 27th. K rate, obviously exceptional. They do walk a bit, and they have a little bit of pop, but the strikeouts are certainly there. 5% owned. I mean, I'm with you guys on this one. I definitely like him more than 5% ownership. I mean, he's got 4% positive leverage on the top two pitchers. Says nothing for the fact that you could save a bit of salary. I'm down with Kolek. He's underrepresented for the matchup he has today. If I wanted to play a bunch of him in DFS, I would probably bet that 4.5 under strikeout prop. Because if that goes under, you'll feel pretty good about it. And if it goes over, you're going to assume he was good. Little coverage there. So yeah, later tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern time, MLB Live Before Lock with myself and Eric. If you guys aren't following me on Twitter right now, I highly recommend that you do that. I'm dropping top pitchers and top stacks each day for these final few days of the regular season and beginning of the postseason. And 2 days ago, I started dropping NBA team previews. The NBA season starts in about 30 days. I dropped a team preview for the Brooklyn Nets. I dropped a team preview yesterday for the Charlotte Hornets. Today, you guys will be getting the Utah Jazz. We're working our way from the bottom to the top in these previews. That will drop later this afternoon. I want you guys to see them. I'm placing a bet as well associated with the team. For the Nets, it's Cam Thomas to average, I believe it's 28 points per game next season. And I'll justify that on tails. For the Hornets yesterday, I legitimately love the bet that I placed on the Hornets. Plus 900 for Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball to both average 4 made threes per game this season. I believe Brandon Miller averaged 3.9 last year. I believe LaMelo was 3.8. The only thing that would be wrong there is if you flip-flop those names. So they're knocking on the door of it already. What if they're both just slightly more efficient or both take like an extra half shot? It's not all that difficult to get there, and we're getting 9-1 on our money. Loved it. Loved it. Where can we find the Oppenheimer report? I haven't loaded it for today. We could talk about it when we get on Live Before Lock, though. What will Eric still have his manhood? I hope not. I hope not. All right, let's get into top stacks. Let me refresh this because this is now updated with JT Brubaker. Here's the top stacks tool for today. It's a very interesting dynamic because the Yankees are at the top of the top stack tool. 12% top stack, but they're obviously not a good value. And it's basically the same story for the Dodgers. They're both around 12% top stack. They're both around 4% top value, and they're the two highest owned teams. But you can see their stack score much lower than Houston, who's technically third in top stack, although we should treat all three of these numbers like they're the same. But not only is Houston as good of a top stack as the other two teams, they're also the number one value by a mile. But somehow, they're only third in ownership with a miles ahead of everybody's stack score. And I started thinking about it for a second, and I'm very surprised to see this. Because to me, it is abundantly clear that Houston looks exceptional from a DFS perspective. We just got done talking about like 7 pay-up pitchers. None of them had any real negatives to them. Most of them are like 30% K rate guys. And now we're here in this matchup with a top stack team very similar to the Yankees and the Dodgers, but cost effective. This strikes me as a spot where Houston pairs perfectly with 2 pay-ups. Like if you want to get let's say you just don't want to use Luis Castillo today. Houston plus 2 of those pay up arms seems like a no-brainer. So let's just take one little tiny peek at Severino. 6,200 for Severino today, 16% K rate to lefties, 18 to righties. Now, he doesn't give up a ton of power, but the park will help with that. He certainly gives up a ton of ex-WOBA to lefties. And if we want to think about what Houston is against righties this season, 17th in WRC plus. They don't strike out at all. 150 ISO is not really appealing. But again, it's the cost-effective nature of this. I had Sims run before I got started. Now, this was with Robbie Ray, but Houston was the team that showed up in everything. I want to build one in the single lineup sim. Like if I take 5 Houston guys right now, let's get Altuve, Diaz, Correa, Jesus Sanchez, and let's just go Zach Cole. We'll take the 5 best values from Houston without adding any guideposts here. I'm really curious to see if we get Castillo, because like from a point per dollar perspective, he's at 2.64 points per $1,000. That's massively ahead of everybody else. I mean, look at the names that are next to him: Taj Bradley and Jonah Tong. When I complete this, I expect Castillo to be in it because I don't think that we could upgrade the spots in the lineup with the saved salary. Castillo, Fried, Ohtani, Duran, and Judge. Just to be clear here, we got the 2 best pitchers on today's slate with the number 1 stack in stack score, and we were still able to roster Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge. If this lineup doesn't grade out well, I'll never understand anything. As we expected, 77% sim ROI. And that's on the small contest. This is actually going to go up, I think. I forgot to change the contest size. If I bump that up to the large contest, does this improve? I think it's going to be like 90 now. 93.2% chance to win, 2.8% chance of a top 10% lineup, and a 43% cash rate. And I legitimately think that I can make this lineup look even better. That's the craziest part here. If I take Max Fried out and I replace him with Blake Snell, can I still end up with Ohtani and Judge? Goldschmidt bets Ohtani. 5-2-1. Snell with 2 Dodgers. 2 good Dodgers, I might add. A one-off Paul Goldschmidt. Boy, oh boy, do I hope this lineup looks better. We gave up a little bit, but we shaved a ton of ownership. Yeah, still 70%. I have to see what happens if I don't go to Luis Castillo. So if we skip Castillo, it becomes... I'm going to go DeGrom and Fried. Like, think about this. The Houston stack with a 9K DeGrom and a $9,700 Fried still allows us 4,600 at each of first, short, and outfield. Goldschmidt, Volpe, Ohtani. We get the 2 guys tied to Max Fried. The only single individual bat that we have is Shohei Ohtani. Cedric, you're 30 minutes behind. 49%. It's very, 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 I might even say very easy. Very easy to get to this Houston stack. If I put Kolek in, who does that complete with? Castillo, Kolek, Ohtani, Betts, Judge. I gotta test it. Ohtani, Betts, Judge. Yeah, dude, I could. You can build this lineup with your eyes closed when you go to Houston. I want to be as clear as possible. That is the absolute number one stack to me, and it's not close. This stack score is telling you the truth. 12.6 for Houston, 8.9 for New York, 8 for the Dodgers. It's not even close to me. Legitimately. The question for me is, Texas is 4th in stack score. They're basically tied as the top leverage team. They're sub 5% owned, and it's the same sort of value proposition. Now, we know the park, not ideal. But what is ideal is facing Taj Bradley. Lefties light him up. 199 X ISO. Swinging strike stuff's not great. Righties are a little bit more reasonable here. But I think, much like this Houston stack, I think Texas is going to be as appealing as a contrarian option. So I'm going to do the same thing that I just did before. Texas value. Obviously, Jock goes straight in. Jonah Heim goes straight in. Jake Berger goes straight in. I'm going to put Alejandro Osuna straight in. And then I'm going to go third base, Josh Jung. Just completing this lineup. Castillo, Fried, Altuve, Witt, Ohtani. I'm telling you guys, it is so easy to load up a lineup today because of some of these stacks. Come on now. What are we doing? 100.6 sim ROI, 5-man Texas stack, 1 off Altuve, 1 off Witt, 1 off Ohtani, with the top 2 pitchers on the slate, and more importantly, $800 left on the table. What does the double pitcher pay up look like? Obviously, Jake DeGrom goes straight in. Actually, if I just use DeGrom, it'll probably give me Castillo. DeGrom, Castillo, Altuve, Witt, Ohtani. It still leaves 1,500. I have to try and upgrade that second pitcher spot. I'm going to go DeGrom, Fried. Gives us Ahmed Rosario, Bobby Witt, Shohei Ohtani. Rosario ties in with Fried. Obviously, we got the Texas tie with Jake DeGrom. We've shaved our ownership a bit in this scenario. Another gem, 62% sim ROI here. So whether it's the value coming out of Texas, whether it's the value coming out of Houston, I think you could probably make the same case for St. Louis, although obviously that park is extra special death. But now we need to look at it in reverse. And I can see Steven is leading to that a little bit. Ronald is doing it in the same way. What does it look like when we try to build these stacks with the Yankees or with the Dodgers? Because now we're flipping the script. We're going from a 12 to 15% top value team to 4. This will completely change the construction of what we're building. So let's start with the Yankees. Clearly, we're just going to put Aaron Judge right in. We're going to put Austin Wells in. I'd be remiss if I don't put Stanton in. And I think we probably want to go Paul Goldschmidt and Ahmed Rosario, and I'm going to put Rosario in at second. I'm guessing this will give me Fried and Castillo. Interesting. It gives me Castillo and DeGrom, pulls in a two-man Texas in Josh Jung and Duran, but we still end up with Shohei Ohtani. So very different lineup there. But we scoop up that value from Texas at low ownership. Another absolute gem. 63% sim ROI. I want to see what happens if we bring Max Fried along for the ride here. Obviously, Fried at 9,700, DeGrom at 9K. We are spending an extra $700 here, but I do like the synergy with the Yanks. We still get Castillo, Paredes, Betts, Jock Peterson. This should be another 60 or 70 sim ROI lineup here. 61.9, 38% cash rate, 2.2 top percent. Let's do the same thing with the Dodgers, which I fully expect to look quite similar. All right, Michael Conforto can go in. We're going to lock Freddie Freeman in at first. We're going to pop Ohtani into the outfield. Mookie Betts goes in at short. Realistically, Tommy Edman's going to go into second. Castillo and Fried. Diaz from Houston. Ahmed Rosario from the Yanks. Jock Peterson once again in that final spot. 45, 50 sim ROI. That's my guess. $100 left on the table. 27, little bit lighter. Okay. Well, I think we can make some tweaks to that. I'm going to go to Snell instead of Fried. I don't know how helpful that is, but I like the correlation. We get Castillo, Diaz, Rosario. Gives us a one-off Tyler Tolbert. I can't imagine that's helpful, but this will still be positive 20, positive 30, something in that neighborhood. And I'm digging in less about the matchup for the Yanks and the Dodgers for very obvious reasons. Yeah, still slightly positive. Got to admit, I am finding the Dodgers a little bit more difficult to get to than the Yankees. Positionally, they don't line up as well as I would like. So we got time enough for one more team. Fellas, hit me with the team. If you guys got somebody that you want me to run quickly, let me know now. Anybody that you guys dupe up on, that'll likely be the one we go with. All right. Red Sox, Mets, A's, Royals. Feels like A's are going to be the answer here against Hunter Brown, but all right, there's a third A's. Okay, we're going to look at the A's very, very quickly. Hunter Brown does not give up power to righties, does not give up power to lefties, does strike out a ton of people. Basically gives up nothing. Now, the ballpark is a bandbox. WRC plus against righties this season, 6th. ISO this season, 4th. Strikeout rate, largely insignificant. Walk rate, largely insignificant. Look, it's a boom-bust spot, undoubtedly. At 5% ownership, I think it's easier to just go to other teams with a 5% top stack odds than going headfirst into Hunter Brown. Are we going to be able to build out a good Houston lineup? Of course. Or sorry, Oakland lineup, rather. Or whatever the hell we're supposed to call this team now. All right, let me rip this one off quickly. So we're going to get Lawrence Butler. We're going to get Kurtz, Langoliers. These guys are not cost effective, and that's a real big problem here. We'll get Soderstrom. I guess we're going to get Rooker as well. We're spending a lot of salary here. Castillo, Fried, Altuve, Rosario, Duran. We've shaved a bit of ownership here, but we've also shaved quite a bit of projection. It's going to be positive, but not very. Yeah, 42. Better than I was expecting, if I'm honest. There's a path there for Oakland, but this is not a path I would want to take. I don't like that matchup. I would rather just not have them. And then we're going to hit Jeff Williams Super Chat to close this one out. That's going to be Luis Castillo, Max Fried, Goldschmidt, Jeff, I'm missing half of your lineup, I think. We don't have Rushing or Sogard in. So no catcher, no second baseman in this scenario. I'm just going to take the optimal. We don't have a ton of salary left over. We get Jonah Heim and Duran. So it ends up becoming a 4-man Yankees, 2-man Dodgers, 2-man Texas, Castillo, Fried. Projection looks good. It's probably a little bit too much ownership. That's solid. 13%, 32% cash rate. There's something there. If I take out Castillo and Fried, it might wiggle those pitchers around. Castillo, DeGrom, Diaz, Duran, Muncy, Hernandez. Is that any better by taking the optimal? That'll be the final thing we take a look at, because I gotta do a thing or two. Yeah, 37.5. We're in the right ballpark. So we took a look through 7 or 8 pitchers. We've worked our way through the different types of stacks that are high upside expensive. We looked at high upside cheap. We split the difference a little bit for you guys. And we'll be back again later today for MLB Live Before Lock. Guys, thank you for being here. I appreciate it a ton. Links in the description. Sign up for baseball for the next week if you want to. NBA is coming. NFL is here. We got Thursday night football tomorrow. Sunday has super early football, early morning showdown. Got the full main slate. Sunday night football. It's going to be a great weekend. But today is Wednesday. Happy hump day, everybody. I'll talk to you later.